Hi everyone, and welcome to this unit's virtual classroom where you will be continuing to focus on functions and learning about range names. This unit's objectives is to avoid circular references, review the insertions of functions from previous unit, determine results with the if function, use lookup functions, calculate payments with the PMT function, create and maintain range names, and use range names in formulas. Let's begin by opening up Microsoft Excel 2010 and opening up a worksheet that will help us understand how to work with the functions. As you notice, when I opened up this spreadsheet, a warning box appeared called Circular Reference Warning. This is advising me that somewhere in my worksheet there is a formula error. Usually a circular reference means that it's referring to another cell within the formula that depends upon the results of that same formula. For example, a cell that refers to its own value or a cell that refers to another cell which depends on the original cell's value both contain a circular reference. So for example, assume you enter the formula equal A8 minus C8 in cell C8. Because the formula is in cell C8, using the cell address C8 within the formula creates a circular reference. Circular references usually cause inaccurate results, and Excel displays a warning message when you enter a formula that contains a circular reference, or when you open an Excel workbook that contains the circular reference as shown here. Let's click OK, as we will work on finding where the circular reference is as we proceed through this video. In this example, you work for Toronto Mortgage Company, and it is your responsibility to complete all your loans and how much the amount financed, your mortgage rates, your monthly payments, your monthly PMI, and all your summary statistics. So let's begin by reviewing last week's unit by inserting basic functions. In B4, it's asking us to insert today's date. So from the previous week, we learned that today's function is equal today, left bracket, right bracket, enter. And it inserts today's date. The next thing we need to figure out is our amount financed. As you can see that there are dashes throughout our worksheet. How come? We know that the amount financed is taking our total house cost and subtracting our down payment. So by clicking inside our D10, which is our first amount financed for the first loan, if we look in the formula bar, we see that it says equal B10 minus C10, which is our house cost minus our down payment. However, there's an addition of D10. Well, this is where our circular reference is. So we need to change our formula. So we can edit our formula by pressing F2, which is a function key at the top of our keyboard, or by clicking inside our formula bar, deleting our circular reference and pressing enter. And you'll notice now that the amount financed has now appeared. By selecting our D10, we can select our autofill, which we learned in the previous unit, and clicking and dragging, and it automatically fixes the formula and adds the values as required. Now that we have our amount financed figured out, we can now figure out our summary statistics. So in B17, it's asking us to calculate our total amount financed. So by again, selecting our drop-down box, choosing sum, selecting all of our amount financed totals, and pressing enter. And it tells us that me, as being a loan officer, has allowed the amount of $1,228,200 to be financed. The next average, so dropping down, choosing average, selecting my amount financed, and pressing enter. So the average loan that I have approved is $245,640. Finding my midpoint, which is my median, I'm going to type this function in. So equal median, left bracket, selecting our amount financed, and pressing enter. The lowest Again, dropping down our menu, selecting min, finding our lowest amount financed is $145,000. Finding the highest, again, dropping down, selecting max, choosing the totals and pressing enter. And the number of mortgages, so how many loans have I actually approved, count numbers, selecting all of my loans and pressing enter. So I have approved 5 loans. As we look at our spreadsheet, the next thing that needs to be calculated is the mortgage rate. The mortgage rate depends on how many years our customer has decided to take our mortgage out. You'll notice that the first loan is 25 years, then 30, then 25, then 15, and then 30. So we need to figure out how much the mortgage rate is depending on how many years the mortgage length is. We're going to use the function called VLOOKUP, V standing for vertical. We're going to take our years, we're going to look it up in a table which is located in the range of D3 to E7, and it's going to return the value of what rate it is based on the years that we're asking for it to look up. So the VLOOKUP function accepts a value, looks the value up in a vertical lookup table, and then returns the result. By selecting formulas and going to our references and lookup, and at the very bottom we're going to choose VLOOKUP. When we do this, a dialog box appears, and we need to enter 3 functions: the lookup value, the table array, and the column index number. The lookup value is the cell reference of the cell that contains the value to look up. So in this case, we are looking up the years of the mortgage. So that is our lookup value. The table array is the range that contains the lookup table. In our example, our lookup table is from D4 to E6. Because this table is going to be used throughout all of our formulas within our VLOOKUP, we must make this absolute. And returning back from last unit, we know by pressing F4 on our keyboard allows for the absolute to be turned on. When you are absoluting a range of D4 to E6, you must make sure that the dollar signs are around everything in that table array line. The last thing we must enter is the column index number, which is the column number in the lookup table that contains the return value. In our example, our lookup table only has 2 columns. The first column is used for the lookup, and the second column is used to return the value. This is the column that we need to enter into the column index number, and it works with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So column 1 is our years, column 2 is our rate. So we need to press number 2 to insert our rate. So what's going to happen is the VLOOKUP function identifies the value stored in the lookup value, searches the first column of the lookup table until it finds an exact match if possible. If Excel finds an exact match, it returns the value stored in the column designated by the column index number on that same row. So by clicking OK, you'll automatically see that the mortgage rate inserted for 25 years is 4.6525%. If I look in my lookup table, you'll notice that 25 years and the rate is 4.625%. So that is a match. What's great about having a function inserted now is that I can now use my fill handle as learned in the previous unit, clicking and dragging down, and it automatically searches for all the years that are listed within my worksheet. So now 30 years is 4.75, 30 years is 4.75, 15 years is 4.25, 15 years is 4.25. Now, when working with loans, and any loans, whether it's personal or work, you need to figure out a monthly payment. So how much is each payment going to be per month? We use a function called the PMT function, and many of you in math class this semester has already learned how to use the PMT. We're now just going to apply it to the Excel format. So under our Formulas tab, by selecting Financial and scrolling through all our financial functions until we see the PMT function. And again, another dialog box appears. We're only going to worry about the first three: rate, NPER, and PV. The rate is the periodic interest rate and the interest rate per payment period. 9 out of 10 times when a bank provides you with a percentage or an interest rate, it is usually based over a year. And how many months are in a year? 12. So to figure out our monthly payment, we need to take the interest rate that is provided to us and divide it by 12. So in this case, we already know what our mortgage rate is from the earliest when we created the VLOOKUP. So we can select G10 for our interest rate. By pressing the divide sign, we now can divide by 12. And we can enter 12, but in this case, we know that if we look, B6 already has a 12 there, so let's choose 12. Now make sure, as you know, that the 12 is now going to be used throughout the entire formula, so we must make this cell an absolute value. And let's move to our next box. The NPER, which means number of periods, is the term that the loan is usually stated in years. However, you have to make several payments per year. So again, to make monthly payments based on a year, we need to multiply this by 12. So we know that the first loan is based on 25 years times our 12. And again, we must make our 12 absolute. And the last insert is our PV, which is our present value of the loan. This is the amount financed. Now we have to make sure that we're aware that the amount financed is money that is not owed to us. It's money that we owe. So that puts us into the negative. So we must always put a negative sign before this cell reference. By pressing OK, we now have inserted a monthly payment. So the first loan every month will pay approximately $1,800. Now using the fill handle, we can scroll down and insert all the monthly payments automatically accordingly to the mortgage rate, the years. The last function to talk about is the if function. The if function is the most common logical function used, which returns one value when a condition is met or is true and returns another value when the condition is not met or is false. We use if statements on a daily basis. For those of you that have kids, we use if statements every day. If you do not pick up your clothes, you're going to your room. If you do not pick up your toys, you're going to time out. So every day we use if statements. Now we just have to apply the ifs function to Excel. So by selecting Formula tab and under Logical, choosing if, and again, we now have the function argument dialog box for the if function. And the if function has 3 arguments. 1, a condition that is tested to determine if it is either true or false. 2, the resulting value if the condition is true. And 3, the resulting value if the condition is false. For this example, lenders often want borrowers to have a 20% down payment when you're buying a house. If borrowers do not put in 20% of the cost of the house as a down payment, they pay a private mortgage insurance. In Canada, we call this a CMHC fee, which is the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. They serve to protect lenders from absorbing loss if the borrower defaults on the loan, and it enables borrowers with less cash to secure a loan. In this example, the CMHC rate is 0.38% of the amount financed. Some borrowers have to pay this fee for a few months or years until the balance owed is less than 80% of the appraised value. So in this case, we need to use the if function to determine which borrowers must pay this fee and how much they will pay. So for our logical test, we need to test whether or not the down payment in E9, or in this case E10, is greater than or equal to the down payment rate in B8. So that is our logical test. We need to test whether or not E10 is greater than or equal to our down payment rate of B8. Because our down payment rate is going to be used throughout all our formulas, we need to make sure that it's absolute. If it's true, if the down payment is greater than or equal to the down payment rate of B8, what do? We want to insert a 0. So what that means is that if E10 is greater than or equal to B8, then we want to insert a 0, meaning that there is no monthly CMHC fee required for this customer. However, if it's false, meaning that the down payment that the customer has put down on the amount financed is less than 20%, we need to figure out the rate. So in this case, if the amount is false, we need to choose the amount financed, multiplying it by, and remember BISM, our CHMC rate, divided by our monthly years. Now again, because B7 and B6 are going to be used throughout our formula, we need to make sure that they're both absolute values. And the reason I put brackets within this formula is because of BISM. We want the division to take place before the multiplication. So by pressing OK, we'll notice that there is no payment required for loan number 1, which is true because their down payment was 20%. By clicking on our fill handle and dragging down, we instantly see that loan 2 is less than 20%, so they owe $91.83 on top of their monthly payment. Loan 3 owes $46.08. Loan 4, there's 0, and as you can see why, because their down payment was greater than 20%. And the last loan was $83.84. So now let's figure out our total payment. So the total monthly payment would then be equal our monthly payment plus any CMHC fee, and then again using the fill handle. Let's move on to the last objective for this unit, range names. To simplify entering ranges in formulas, you can use range names. A range name is a word or string of characters assigned to one or more cells. Think of range names in this way. Your college identifies you by your student ID. However, your professors call you by an easy-to-remember name, such as Mika or Kristen. Similarly, instead of using cell addresses, you can use descriptive range names in formulas. A range name can contain up to 255 characters, but it must begin with a letter or an underscore. A range name cannot include spaces or special characters, and you must create the range name first before being able to use it within a formula. So in this example, let's create some name ranges. In the first chapter of Excel, we learned about the name box, which is located on the left-hand corner of our screen. When I select a cell to make it active, the cell address automatically appears in the name box. There are many different ways to create a range name. The easiest way is to use the name box. So by selecting house cost, I can click up in the name box and name it house cost. I now have created a range name. I can select down payment, click on the name box, and type in down payment. Again, I can do the same thing for amount financed. And last but not least, I can do the same for total payment. To edit or to delete a range name, we need to use the Name Manager. So under the Formula tab, you'll see the Name Manager, which opens up a dialog box. And you'll notice that there are quite a few name ranges already done, as well as the ones that I've already created in our example. In our previous section of this video, we learned how to include functions as total using sum, average, median, lowest, and highest. When we did this, we inserted a cell reference argument of D10 to D14, which are our cell addresses. For the summary statistics for total payment, we're actually going to use name range. So again, under our auto sum, we can choose sum, and instead of selecting our cells, we're going to type in total payment. Enter. And you'll notice that using our name range is a lot easier and simplifies our formula. Equal average, left bracket, total, and it comes up so I can double click, enter. Same thing for median, total, double click, enter. And this works for the lowest, highest, and number of mortgages. This concludes our unit video. Please make sure you complete the required exercises for this unit.